Let's talk about wealth inequality. Since 1978, the average pay for workers in the US has gone up by 20%. For CEOs, it has gone up by 1,500%. Why is this happening? Let's talk about the economics a bit. For a company that generates profit, there are basically two places that profit can go, either to dividends to shareholders or in wages to employees. Since 1978 and generally since the past century, more and more of that money has been going to shareholders. And we see that reflected in the way that people are being paid less for work now. Why does this happen and what could workers do in a perfect world? In a perfect world, they could organize labor unions and go on strike and make it so that no company that offers a pay that is this low is actually able to get good quality employees. But they still do in the status quo currently in the modern day. Why is that? Because all of the companies are paying low and no one is able to effectively organize labor unions. Why? Because if you're a person that's about to enter a labor union and go on strike, you fear for your job. And according to the law or most laws, typically a person shouldn't be fired for entering a labor union or negotiating for work. But in places with weak regulation, which is most places actually, there is significant fear of being managed out by your corporation or the place you're working for. Why is that? Policy is weak because politicians are basically bribed by corporations, but not bribed in the legal technical sense, but rather through a set of legal yet still insidious means. For example, in the US in 2024 alone, the presidential or federal elections cost a total of $15 billion. Politicians are rich maybe, but they don't have enough to fund a $15 billion campaign. Where does that money come from? It comes from corporations. Corporations with interests, corporations that make donations that have no strings attached to politicians in order to subtly nudge those politicians when they get into office to make policies that are good for corporations. What is good for corporations? Paying their workers less. So it's no joke to say that there's something fundamentally broken about how democratic elections work in relation to capitalism. But it's not just that, it doesn't end there. Once politicians get into power, you have what you call corporate lobbying. Lobbying is when an interest group or an organization basically pays money to talk to politicians and show research that is often biased and to generally convince and sway these politicians to make policies that support their cause. Typically, the lobby groups that have the most money have the most opportunities to push or create influence on politicians. Guess who has the most money? Corporations. Do labor unions have a lot of money? Probably not if they have to go and strike for their wages. And that is why wealth inequality is getting worse. So, unless we fix the policies that protect labor unions and protect workers' rights, wealth inequality is just going to keep getting worse.